Welcome to Your Lettings Journey, a brand new podcast that's essential listening for landlords with property in North London. Now, everyone will have their own unique landlord journey, from the way they get into property to the way they hang up or pass on their keys, and then all the different decisions in between. But along the way, we're all faced by many of the same issues and potential pitfalls. I'm Rachel.
And I'm Ramesh, and together we have a lifetime of experience as landlords, letting agents and tenants that we want to share with you to help you navigate your lettings journey.
So if you're an experienced landlord wanting to make sure that you're keeping on the right side of all the rules and regulations, or if you're completely new to this game and don't know where to start, then this is the podcast for you.
Your Lettings Journey is produced by Belvoir Enfield and Central Housing Group. For more information, visit belvoir.co.uk/Enfield and centralhousinggroup.com. Hello, and in this week's episode, we're going to be discussing furniture. Should I furnish my rental property? How much extra rent am I going to achieve by furnishing my rental property? These are some of the questions we're going to answer in this week's episode. Okay, so Rachel, we're going to talk about a really exciting subject this week, furniture. The big question I always get asked, and I'm sure you do, should I furnish my property?
Yes, Ramesh, it is a question I get asked, and I almost always give the same answer.
Oh, yes.
No.
What's that? Really?
It's no. It's no. That's my level of interest with furniture, I'm afraid. No. Generally.
Oh,
I'd say 9 times out of 10, it's
Really?
it's a no.
Does it? No, nothing else.
Well, let me ask you. I mean, guaranteed rent-wise, I'm a landlord. I come and see you. I've got a property in Barnet, and I say, Ramesh, should I furnish my property for you?
No.
There you go. Short episodes.
Yes.
Right.
No. I mean, good question, Rachel. Should I furnish my property on guaranteed rent? Not fully furnish it. So I would say largely unfurnished. So I need white goods, a cooker, a fridge freezer, net curtains, blinds, heavy curtains, or a variation or something to cover the windows, and obviously carpets or laminate floor or whatever. But other than that, I do not require anything else. And I frequently ask landlords to remove things, believe it or not. Yesterday, I was in Mill Hill, NW7, with a landlord, elderly chap, got a nice property, got some new furniture, some old furniture. And he's like, are we all good to go? I said, well, not really. I need all the furniture out. And he's like, oh, really? Why? And I thought to myself, well, I've got to be careful here. But diplomatically, some of the furniture was really old and just sort of not up to it. But yes, so that's what I would say, Rachel.
Hang on a minute, though. Much as I don't want to be overly interested in furniture. So you're saying you turned his furniture down because it was old, but I thought you didn't do furniture anyway.
Well, the problem is I had to justify it and explain one of the reasons why. And part of the reason was it was old. And I say to landlords, look, tenants will come in and they'll say, right, we want all this furniture out, or we don't want it, or we want to replace it. I can let a property furnished, but I don't ask for it to be furnished. This property had the furniture in it.
Okay, bear with me, because I am more interested now, because I thought with your scheme that properties were just unfurnished. Are you saying that the council, so you go to the council and you say, okay, I have a furnished property and I have 2 unfurnished properties. Do you have tenants for all 3? Or do you say to them, okay, you've got a tenant, what would they like, furnished or unfurnished? How does it work?
Essentially, they have a minimum requirement, which is just the white goods, as I said earlier. But if there is furniture in the property and a landlord is really keen to sort of let it and leave it and it's acceptable, we will let it and say to the council, this property does have some furniture in it. The bottom line is the local authorities have so much demand these days, they're not going to turn down a property because it's got some items of furniture in it. So they will invariably take and use the property, but I don't encourage landlords to put furniture in, if that makes sense. I don't want to actively
it makes perfect sense. I'm just very surprised that the council would accept properties with furniture in it that isn't necessarily completely to their standard or what have you.
Well, it would be of an acceptable standard that we would accept because it was in a good condition and serviceable and have, fire safety labels in place. So we'd have to meet all those requirements, but they wouldn't actively say, right, we won't take this property because you've got furniture in it.
Interesting. Because my flippant answer with the no
Yeah.
was it's just a case of the only times that I would say, okay, let's think about furnishing is if it was sharers, so an HMO, housing multiple occupation, or potentially a studio flat. That's in kind of this neck of the woods because it's all about who is your tenant going to be.
Yeah.
So, I could sit here and I could say, oh, yes, it's a good idea to have, to give a furnished property because, students love it. Well, we're not really a university area. Maybe you have something around Barnet College, or Connell or what have you. So, but generally we're not a student accommodation type area. Or maybe if you have a lot of people who are staying in this area for work. So they're working in the city, but Monday to Friday, they need to live in London and they live as, somewhere outside. Normally they're on the coast or something. And so, somebody just wants a property to live in Monday to Friday and head back home, then they're going to want it furnished. But that's kind of not really our market.
Sure.
So the only time I would say to somebody, okay, you might want to think about furnishing is if it was sharers or if it was, really sharers around here.
Yeah.
So given that the properties, as I understand it, that you let out tend to be for families, my idea, families, that's why I say to people, don't do it for 2, 3, 4 bedroom properties because people in families tend to come with their furniture. If they're young and they're transient, they're sharers, they've got a rucksack on their back, happy days, they want to move around. But families, you've got your 2.4 kids, you've got the dog or the cat or what have you, and you have a truckload of furniture that comes with you.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't want somebody else's furniture. So I'm very surprised that the council would say, yeah, okay, that's fine, as opposed to saying, okay, well, we've got a warehouse down the road. You can go and store all of that landlord's furniture in there and we'll take it out again at the end of the tenancy.
Yeah, I mean, that's the last thing that council will want to do because they do not want to incur cost of storage of somebody's furniture items.
No, I get that. But I just, in the same way that you would say to a landlord, you've got to put in, so I know you have lots of not extreme, but you have lots of additional fire safety requirements. So in the same way that you might say to a landlord, you've got to have fire doors, you've got to have mains wired smoke alarms, you've got to have a mains wired heat alarm, you've got to have restrictors on doors, all the extra stuff that you make landlords put in for a guaranteed rent let over and above what we might put in for a standard private let. It just seems very odd to me that you would then say, no, it's okay, you can leave your sofa and 2 beds and dining table. It seems very odd to me that you would make them incur costs for that, but then allow them to keep the furniture there.
Yeah, well, I mean, it would cost them more to dispose of the furniture and effort and headache. And most landlords, once they've got some furniture, in my experience, when I deal with a new landlord, if they've got furniture already there or they're purchased, they don't want to be taking it out, storing it, moving it around. It's all headache and faff for them. So that's why, and at the end of the day, councils need properties and, we're happy to take properties on. So we'll try and work with the landlord, if that makes sense.
I get that. No, but yeah, I do understand that. My question is, I guess if you're throwing out the sort of furniture that you invariably see in rental properties, the cost of that furniture and the cost of disposing it is less than the money that you make them spend on fire safety. So it just seems an odd one that they would be so tied to leaving that furniture there when you say to them, I can't take your property without you doing X, Y, Z. Why you can't just say, I can't take your property with this furniture in it. I'm pressing a point, so we can let that one go. I understand your answer, but it just seems an odd one to me.
Well, every landlord is different. Some take a view that, well, I've spent this money, I'm not throwing it away, So that actually moves us on to a really interesting question now that I often get asked, and I'm sure you do, where you get a landlord who's moving abroad for 2 years or 3 years for work purposes, and they need to let their main and principal home, and they've houses fully furnished with all their stuff, and they've got nowhere to put their stuff, and they want to let it furnished. What do you say to them? How do you deal with them?
Really depends. For most people, I would say, if you're coming back to this property and you're expecting this furniture to be exactly as you've left it, it's probably not going to be. There will be wear and tear. There may be damage. I'm not saying that everyone's going to be damaging property, but there may be damage. Things do break. There will be wear and tear on it. So it's probably not going to be exactly as you left it. So if there's stuff that really is important and sentimental or of great value, I would say move it. So, but we have had a couple of people who have said, I want to let this property furnished. And on one occasion, we had a landlord who did a lot of painting and sculpture work, and he left a painting in his property. And although we noted it down in the inventory, and we advised the tenants to, please be careful with this painting, it's one of the landlord's own, it then got damaged. It was knocked off the wall by the children. Excuse me. And it got thrown away. And then the landlord said, but that was worth nearly £800. It's like, well, if it's that valuable, don't leave it in a rental property.
Yeah.
It's kind of, so yes, if you've got a few things like you've got a bookcase or you've got a standard bed frame, or a sofa that didn't cost you £6,000 or £7,000 or what have you, then fine. But otherwise, I'd say, can you put it in storage?
Yeah.
Or do you have a friend's garage or somewhere that you can put it in the meantime? Do you have a garage with this property? You can put it in the garage and the garage is then not included in the tenancy. Things like that. Or just, we can keep it so long as you are aware that, number one, you may not get it back in exactly the same, exactly as good as it was when you gave it to us. I can't remember what my second point was going to be.
It doesn't matter. I actually, don't worry.
No. Sorry, the second point was going to be, it's going to cut down your market. Because it will cut down your market, definitely.
Sure.
Because your standard family has their furniture, so they want to move into your property. You have all of your furniture there. What do they do with their furniture? Sure. Somebody's putting something in storage.
Yeah, good point. Well, I mean, I've had it before, and I'm sure you have. Some landlords will say, look, I don't have the budget to put all my stuff in storage. I don't want to do that. I need to let it furnished. So how can you go about protecting that landlord's furniture? What's the protection or the mechanism that is available?
Well, the basics are you have an inventory, and an inventory obviously with a furnished property, because it takes longer, will cost more than an inventory with, on an unfurnished property.
Yeah.
But that's kind of not the end of the world. You've got to be very detailed about the condition of the property. And as I say, anything that is particularly valuable or particularly sentimental, just take away. Put somewhere else, let a friend have it, what have you. There's only so much that you can claim back if something is damaged as part of the inventory, or
Right.
something is in inventory and is then damaged.
Yeah,
there's only so much you can claim back. If somebody, you get a cup ring or something on a bookcase, you can't claim for the entire bookcase.
Yeah.
If you get a cigarette burn, or a hair tongs seem to burn a lot of stuff. But if you get a burn on a sofa from hair tongs, you can't claim for a whole sofa.
Yeah.
So I'm just very upfront with people, like, okay, you can keep the furniture. It will cut down the market. It may not come back in the same condition. And if there is damage to it, you won't be able to do a like for like replacement on this. It's like if somebody puts an iron burn in the corner of a carpet, you don't get the whole carpet back. You can claim for maybe X amount of pounds, dependent A, on the size of the burn, and B, on the age of the carpet or sofa or whatever else it is.
I think you make a really good point there, Rachel, because I think sometimes landlords sort of feel that it's almost like there's a new for old policy. If something gets damaged, it will just get replaced. And I think that's a really critical, important point for landlords to remember. If they are going to leave furniture in a property, they aren't going to get the whole item replaced or made good. There's going to be, if it has to go to somewhere like deposit, TDS, the dispute, tenancy dispute deposit scheme. You know what I mean? TDS, where you go
one
and
of
dispute.
the deposit schemes. If it goes to one of the deposit schemes,
What do you call it when you go to
a
dispute with the government's dispute resolution?
You call it dispute resolution. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Right, let's move on. When you go there, you invariably only get a certain percentage, a certain amount, exactly what you're saying. So I think that's important for landlords to remember that, because a lot of them I've come across think that there's a new for old policy that applies. Well, if that's damaged, then I'll get a new one. Doesn't work like that, I'm afraid.
No, there's standard depreciation that they put in terms on things. I mean, there's lots of things like, say, carpets that I think is 5 to 8 years. They expect you to replace them depending on whereabouts it is, if it's high traffic or low traffic. And I saw the other day kitchens as well. I think it's meant to be 10 years for a kitchen.
Oh, really?
It's because you expect a heavier use of things if you have a regular change of tenants. So same applies to sofas. Your sofa is not going to last 20 years in a rental property.
No.
If you're coming back or 2 or 3 years time to your sofa, you can expect wear and tear. Unless you bought it immediately before somebody moved in, chances are you won't get very much back at all if
Sure.
there is any damage to it. And then the problem you have going on from that is if you then go to let it to somebody else and your property is slightly damaged and slightly less attractive, you take a small market and make it even smaller.
True. No, very good point. I'm going to move us on a little bit, Rachel. Imagine you've got a couple who are getting together and one's moving out from their flat and they're moving into the others. So they say, look, I've got all this furniture that's spare. What do I do with it?
I say much the same as I would say ordinarily. I would say much the same as I would say to any other kind of furniture is if you insist on this furniture staying, so you're not flexible about losing any or all of it or taking any or all of it away, then it's going to cut down your market. Unless, of course, that person's moving from a studio flat.
Right.
Because studio flats do, of course, appeal to generally younger people. And so they don't have all of the furniture and everything else that comes with it. Although, obviously, bearing in mind that tenants are getting older. So that's a generalization that doesn't necessarily work. But I would say, yeah, if you're moving from a standard 2-bedroom flat and you want to leave all of your furniture behind, unless you're renting it to sharers, then yeah, your furniture, they probably won't want. So I'd say be flexible on it.
Okay. But
be flexible. If the tenants don't have, for example, wardrobes, because a lot of people will have built-in wardrobes in one place and then they go to somewhere else that doesn't have wardrobes, then they don't have the wardrobes. And they don't necessarily want to have wardrobes because the next place they go to may have built-in wardrobes.
Sure.
So then if you've got wardrobes going spare, fine, be flexible, leave wardrobes there. But other than that, I'd say bed, sofa, what have you. People may think, yeah, your bed's better than mine, so I'll keep it. That's fine, thank you, but I don't want the sofa and I don't want the second bed and I don't need your dining table. That's fine. So be flexible if you have stuff that's going spare.
Okay, but surely I'm going to get more rent for the property because it's furnished. I mean, there is data out there from, I'm sure you've heard of Data Loft. Data Loft say that on average you get £83 per calendar month more in rent when you furnish a property. So does that not seem to suggest it's worthwhile furnishing?
No. that tells me you've got a stat that sounds great, but in reality just doesn't make sense. So no, it doesn't make sense to me. I mean, if you take properties, let's say in central London, and you have an unfurnished one immediately, an unfurnished 2-bedroom flat bang slap next to a furnished 2-bedroom flat, you're letting them to different markets. Let's say. So the one that's 2 bedrooms is a person who lives in Sussex but comes to work in London Monday to Friday and so wants a nice furnished property. And the other one is perhaps someone who is local and a worker and is going to live here all the time. Then yeah, you probably will get more for the furnished property, but it's a different market. If you try and adopt the same policy in Enfield, then no. And it also depends on the furniture because the kind of person that's going into that 2-bedroom flat in central London will want nice furniture. They're not going to want your landlord special. They're not going to want your cast off stuff that you've decided your partner's got a better bed, your partner's got a better sofa, so all of your furniture is staying there. They're going to want nice furniture. So yes, but quite potentially in those circumstances, absolutely.
So would you say it's worth being flexible? What if I get the perfect tenant that comes along on paper and I think, look, got the perfect tenant and they need furniture and they need to move in within whatever time scale, but they don't have any furniture because they're coming from they're a sharer or something like that previously. Do we not need to be flexible?
I'd say it depends on the market. If you look at the market now, you have massive demand and not so much supply.
Yeah.
So there's less need to be flexible. If you've got a house that's particularly hard to let, let's say,
right.
Let's say you've got a 6-bedroom flat or 6-bedroom house rather, or 5-bedroom house. And as I said, the people who want to move in have come from a super modern, built-in wardrobes everywhere type property, and they don't want to buy 5 wardrobes to go in this property. then maybe there's an element of flexibility there, because you're not going to have that many people that would be interested in a property that's that size.
Sure.
But invariably, if you're looking at a 2 or 3 bedroom property and they're saying, oh, we've got everything except the dining table, will you buy us a dining table and chairs? I'd say no at the moment. Maybe if times change, but at the moment, the market doesn't warrant that.
No, I think that you're right. The market conditions right now are very strong in favour of landlords in terms of there's more tenants looking. But obviously, these things change and cycles come and go. So, yeah.
They do. But even if they were to change and I was in that situation and somebody said, I've got all of my furniture, or, we found you a perfect, I say to a landlord, we found you the perfect tenant, but they don't have a dining table and chairs. They'd really like dining table and chairs. I think I would almost be tempted to say, reduce the rent by £200 or what have you for the first month. Let them buy their own table rather than you as landlord buying table and chairs. Because for me, the whole concept of having furniture in your rental property, we'll come back to the costs of, or the increased rent you could potentially get, but the actual benefits of having furniture in your property tax-wise have kind of gone now.
Yes, that's right.
And furniture just becomes a hassle. It becomes a hassle because once it's in and it's beautiful, it then gets damaged. It then gets wear and tear. You'll then have something spilt on one of the chairs. You'll have a burn on a sofa. You then have to maintain it. You have to look after it. You have to potentially replace it. It gets slightly damaged. You're not going to throw out a sofa because it's got hair tongue mark in the middle of one of the cushions. But for the next person coming in, it becomes less attractive. So it's a bit of a hassle. So I would almost be inclined to reduce the rent for the first month to help somebody buy furniture and go on from there, than supply furniture myself if I'm buying it new.
Okay. No, that makes sense. So despite all that, you've still got this landlord. And
he says, I must have my property furnished.
I want to furnish my property. And it's their absolute desire and will. And they're going to furnish this property. What advice would you give them?
I would generally say make sure your furniture is of decent condition. Make sure it passes all the fire safety requirements, has all the various labels, etc. Make sure you have it PAT tested, portable appliance tested if it's electrical. And make sure you have a good inventory.
Any particular style, type, decor, retro?
Well, it depends.
Modern?
I mean, if he's already got his own furniture, then I'm not going to tell him what style. You made a mistake. That's the wrong style. I mean, I do, but I mean, if you're saying to me he's ignoring my advice and saying no, I want to buy it furnished.
Yeah.
I want to let it furnished.
Yeah.
And then he's asking me what style furniture. I'm saying it's going to be a pretty short relationship. Okay, so
come on,
again,
you wouldn't let him go for that, Rachel.
I don't know, the whole landlord, the agent's relationship with the tenant and the agent's relationship with the landlord are really important. And if your landlord isn't going to take your advice on something as simple as furnishing the property, are they going to take your advice further down the line? And it's the same, it's vice versa. Landlords need to feel that they've got an agent who's singing the same tune as them, who sees things in, the same way as them, or that they trust, and who's going to be making decisions that are the decisions that they would make about their property. Yeah. So it's not a good sign if you say, I don't think you should buy furniture for this property, and they say, no, but I'm going to buy furniture for this property. Then they're not going to say to you, well, what sort of furniture should I buy, Rachel? But assuming they do. Okay, so assuming they do. If you're talking about sharers, then I would say you probably you're not splashing out on massively expensive stuff. You're buying something that is probably cheaper end of the market, but is still fairly solid. Yes, you'll probably have to buy it twice rather than buy it once, but it's going to have heavy usage probably. So yes, it's like a carpet. It needs to be solid, not particularly pretty, not fluffy, no bling, but, very usable, very functional, comfortable bed. Don't believe in scrimping and scraping on mattresses. So just functional, but not necessarily particularly ornate.
Sure. No, okay. That sounds like good, solid advice.
However, if it was a central London overlooking the Thames, beautiful pad for some city slicker who was going to be there Monday to Friday, then I would be saying, you want to buy nice furniture.
Yeah, absolutely.
Make it good. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. All right. Well, I think we're coming near to the end of this episode about furniture, but a couple of other things I was going to mention. One was appliances. So I often get asked by landlords, what should I buy in terms of a fridge, freezer, and a cooker, assuming it was a freestanding cooker or whatever, or integrated appliances or whatever. And my advice to landlords on appliances is go for sort of mid-range brand and price, known brands, British or European, but established and known brands, because they're more likely to be easy to repair, obtain parts, and deal with sort of manufacturers with service call-outs or under warranty issues. So, any thoughts from your end about appliances?
Yeah, generally when it comes to appliances, I would say get something that is reputable. You generally don't go top end, but again, it very much depends on the property. So, if you do have let's say you've got a nice flat on Beach Hill or something, you're probably going to put a Bosch in it, but you're probably not going to put that in the majority of properties.
No, absolutely. Makes sense.
I'd say. So as long as it's safe,
yeah,
fit for purpose. So you don't put something that's got, excuse me, if you've got a washing machine, you don't put something that's got a 6 kilogram load in a property that's a 4-bedroom house. So you've got to make sure that it's suitable for the property that you're putting it into.
Yeah.
Is probably more important. You don't want something that's going to break down all the time. You don't want something you're going to have to keep replacing every year or 2 years, but at the same time, yeah, you want to get something that's solid and sensible, really.
Sure. Okay. Just looking at my notes here, Rachel, I've got, what if I make a mistake?
About
what are the implications?
You don't let your property. Your property stays empty. Yeah. I mean, it depends. If you make a mistake and you furnish property and you don't need to furnish property, you will probably find out, because people tend to not ignore when a property is furnished, but you get a lot of people who will turn up for a furnished property and then say, well, I don't really want this, and would the landlord be able to move that, and could they move that? And so you can give that feedback back to the landlord and say, look, we've had half a dozen viewings. The furniture broadly is not wanted by people. So then the issue of making a mistake is that, you then have to put this in storage or what have you. If you were to buy the wrong type of furniture, so if you buy particularly lovely, delicate furniture for, students, then yes, your furniture is going to get damaged and it won't be worth, you'd have spent an awful lot of money on something that you didn't need to, and it doesn't last very long. If you put really cheap furniture into a property that is not, that is aimed at older people, then yes, they won't particularly want your property. If you put in stuff that is, what I think you're getting at is the fire safety side of things. So if you put furniture into a property that doesn't pass the fire safety standards, then you risk some quite serious things. So I did have a look at this. So you could be imprisoned for up to 6 months. You could have a £5,000 fine for each item that doesn't pass fire safety. If somebody dies, you could be charged with manslaughter. So yes, if you have a sofa or mattress or bed base or anything like that, you need to make sure that it does pass the regulations.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Quite definitely.
Very much so.
Excuse me.
All those furniture items should be fitted with a fire safety label, to confirm that they meet the soft furnishings and fire regulations.
Although the PAT testing is probably not more important. Yes, you do. You have a legal requirement to make sure that your soft furnishings, what have you, are up to standard and have the relevant BS or kite mark or what have you on them.
Yeah.
But the vast majority of fires start in the kitchen and with appliances. The vast majority. It's just that something like 6 or 7% of fires are caused by people smoking or falling asleep
Yes.
when smoking,
yeah.
that sort of thing, 6 or 7%, whereas I think it's like 40-something% are fires from kitchen appliances.
Yeah.
The difference is that 30-something% of fatalities from fire are caused by the smoking or falling asleep, well, with that sort of thing. So there's more likely to be a fatality if you've provided your tenant with a mattress that isn't up to scratch.
Yes, agree.
So that's, I guess, why all of those soft furnishing things like the sofa and the mattress have to be up to fire standard, because there's more chance of you dying. But one thing I'd like to see more of is heat alarms in kitchens, particularly nowadays, because everyone's putting their dishwashers and washing machines and everything else on before they go to bed, because it's cheaper to run it at night. But if the majority of fires come from appliances in the kitchen, then I'd like to see heat alarms, I think, in kitchens, rather than waiting for the smoke alarm to go off, to be notified, as quickly as possible by something in the kitchen.
That's an interesting point. So on guaranteed rent schemes with councils, they insist on mains powered heat alarms fitted in kitchens, which are linked to the smoke alarm. So they would trigger straight away, because obviously they work to that higher level of health and safety. But I think that's possibly somewhere where they'll go next.
Yes,
I'm sure. Okay, so look, I think we've come to the end of this one about should I furnish my property? I think we kind of know the answer is ideally really no, but there's some things to take on board. And was there any sort of final tips or things you wanted to say in sort of summary, Rachel? I've got 3, which I'll share in a minute.
Okay. In general, I'd say know your market. Who is your market? You need to know who your market is before you consider whether you're going to furnish your property, and when you then consider what type of furniture you want. I'd say the stats in relation to fire fatalities, unfortunately, do make me think smokers are... I probably wouldn't let to a smoker. Do I mean that? I don't know, but something to be aware of. And then also candles. I'd be wary of candles. And then I'd look at heat alarms. 4 things. Sorry.
Okay, great. No, that's really helpful. I was going to say, these days it's now less attractive for landlords to put furniture in from a tax perspective, because previously you would get a 10% disregard on your annual rental income because you've let the property as furnished. It's called a wear and tear allowance. That was abolished a few years ago. Now you will only be able to claim for the items you actually provide. So bear that in mind. Be flexible and open-minded. As you said, the market, at the moment is busy, but that market isn't going to stay the same forever. So be flexible and open-minded. If you get a great offer of a tenant and they want a certain item of furniture, look for a solution to try and get them, whether it's to reduce rent or to purchase the items or whatever. And this is one final one that I've come across many times over the years. Landlords comes to you, calls you in to do evaluation, says, here's my property, I would like to let it. And they've gone and fully furnished it and they didn't need to. So don't buy anything until you found your tenants and agreed with what's required if you are going to put any furniture at all. So those are my sort of top tips.
I would absolutely agree with those.
Thank you,
We could
Rachel.
add lots of things to that, but we
Absolutely.
because I know I go on too much.
Yeah.
So I'll end there. Thank you.
Okay, well, on that note, I'd like to say thank you all for listening and watching, and we will see you all on the next episode.
See you next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
If you enjoyed this episode, then we'd love your support. Please subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode of the podcast with your friends.
We'd also love to hear from you about any topics you'd particularly like us to discuss. Please send an email to yourlettingsjourney@gmail.com.
Thanks for listening, and see you for the next episode of Your Lettings Journey. Goodbye.
Goodbye.